Luxurious hearses. Argue not with the people of the book, unless it be in a better way, except with such of them as do wrong, and say, We believe in that which has been revealed to us, and revealed to you. Our God and your God is one, and to God do we surrender. Quran 29:46. It was late afternoon. It was before the new Democratic government placed a ban on mass transportation of corpses from one end of the country to the other. Jibril had worked so hard to forget the previous 2 days that his mind was in turmoil as he waited to travel south with the crowd at the motor park on the outskirts of Lupa. He knew that even if people were stacked up like yam or cassava tubers in a basket, most would still be left behind. Fortunately, he had paid for a seat on the only bus left. To the north, the road skipped over the low hills and flattened out, straight, into the savannah toward Kampi, Jubril city, then into Niger. To the south it turned into a series of corners, slipping toward River Niger, toward Onyera and Port Harcourt, and then into the Atlantic. Though he was still a teenager, Jibril looked mature for his age. He was fair-skinned and wore a blue oversized long-sleeved shirt. His brown jean trousers were dirty and hung like curtains on his willowy frame. A worn Marion medal dangled from his neck, and his cowherd feet were crammed into undersized canvas shoes, their laces missing, their tongues jutting out like those of goats being roasted. Jibril had pulled down his baseball cap so that it covered most of his youthful face and hid the brilliance of his big eyes and his sharp nose. A Muslim, he had done a good job disguising himself as a Christian fleeing south. And, in any case, because of the religious conflict in the country, nobody would expect a northerner or Muslim to risk traveling with the Christians to the south or to the Delta. The bus was the type his compatriots simply called luxurious bus, a 70-seat monster and second-hand import from Latin America that dominated the roads. In times of peace, these buses made cross-country travel easy. The hundreds of police checkpoints never stopped the buses to search them or to harass their drivers for money because the bus companies made enough to settle with the National Police Command monthly. The radio, television, and print media had a lot of ads about these buses. Their fares were within the reach of many, and, with the country's aviation industry being so unreliable, the best of the buses were gaining the confidence of the elite. When suddenly these vehicles started offering long-distance night travel, many jumped for it. Business people went to sleep on the bus in the evening, then woke up and continued their business the next morning on the other side of the country. Jibril had never seen nor been in a luxurious bus before. The very conservative brand of Islam practiced in his neighborhood in multi-religious Kampi had made it impossible for him to listen to the radio or watch any form of TV or pay attention to newspapers. With his state of mind now, he had forgotten the only thing he had heard about these buses from his friends. They had a constant supply of electricity, unlike what NEPA was providing the rest of the country. But now that peace had deserted the land and Nigeria was on a war footing, the myth of the luxurious bus meant nothing to Jibril or the crowd at Lupa Motor Park. Their only worry now was the disappearance of the bus driver into Lupa City, which was a couple of miles away. He had been gone the whole day, scouting for black market fuel for the long journey ahead, and the conductors had kept the luxurious bus locked since morning. Fuel had become a scarce commodity in the country. Cars had to line up for days on end at the pumps. The crowd, restless and growing in size, milled around the bus, whose red window blinds were drawn. Its dark three-tone facade was a dying glow, as the Harmattan haze began to shut out the sun even before it dropped below the horizon. The motor park was ringed by a semicircle of stores and restaurants. Some of them were running out of provisions, and others had simply closed for fear of looting. Some travelers sat, gloomy and tired, on their verandas, too discouraged or hungry to wait near the bus. The park was unpaved and uneven, the wide potholes as sandy as the bed of a seasonal river in the dry months. Beyond this, the savannah, cloaked in the reddish Harmattan dust, extended in every direction like an endless ocean, with Lupa City and a few villages and towns dotting it like little islands. Though the savannah had a few tall evergreen trees, for the most part it was full of short, stout trees, and even those stood far apart, as if they hated each other's company, their leaves gone, The branches pointed at the sky like 1,000 crooked fingers. Between the trees were shrubs and grass that had been singed by the dry season, and dark expanses of scorched undergrowth where the villagers had undertaken their annual bush burning craze. Jibril had tried to take in the babel of languages that were being spoken at the motor park. He had heard many languages spoken in one place before, but today they only emphasized his estrangement from the group. Somehow, even when he knew that there were no Hausa Fulani in the park, and that no Hausa would be spoken, he still yearned for it. He listened hard, longing to hear it as he did at the Bawara market in Kampi, where the more than 200 languages of its country seemed represented. But here he could mainly hear the Igbo language because of the many Igbos fleeing to their homes in the southeast. He could also hear the minority language of the Delta tribe, and even those of the northern minorities who were retreating to whatever places had been their ancestral homes. Those who spoke English did so with accents peculiar to their tribes, all of them unlike Jibril's accent. The more he paid attention to the noisy crowd, the more convinced he became that the best way to disguise himself was to speak as little as possible. To ease his feelings of estrangement, he dug into his bag and pulled out a piece of paper on which had been written the name of the village in the Delta where his father was born. He read the name silently many times. He knew that if he had to say it out loud his accent would betray him, which is why he got Malam Abdu Ali, the Good Samaritan who helped him make this trip, to write it out clearly for him. Many years back, Jibril's mother, as if goaded by some uncanny ability to read the future, had insisted, against Jibril's protestations, that his father come from an oil-producing village in the Delta region, and that his father's relatives would always protect him. Even now he knew nothing about the place, but with this paper he felt like one on the verge of discovering something very important, something that could give him the identity his troubled nation had failed to provide. This feeling of adventure would have been enough for his mind to handle in peaceful times, but during this flight it felt like an added burden. He wished he had traveled there before now. All day he had pined for the bus's departure, like a prisoner anticipating his release from jail. He had waited with the crowd, aware that he was not one of them, knowing that he was an easy target for the sporadic violence that had seized the land, that a simple thing like his accent could give him away. He was one of those who had lost their families in the Sharia crisis in Kampi, and many times during this journey the weight of the tragedy had shocked him out of proper recollection of the events that had precipitated it. He knew this bus was his only way to safety, and had tried everything to forget what had happened to him, including the 2-day hunger that was sinking its jaws into his stomach. Yet now and then his despair broke through his control, and he bit his thin, dry lips. Sometimes, in a last-ditch effort to suppress his tears, he shut his eyes tight. Though he was exhausted, he hovered around the bus, not wanting to sit on the verandas of the stores or restaurants, as many of his compatriots were doing, or even on the bare earth, succumbing to fatigue. To him his fellow travelers looked like drowning men, grabbing onto whatever they could before they were swept away by the crisis that had overtaken their country. Some were with their children and spouses. Some had lost everything, even their sanity. For the first time in Jibril's life, it did not infuriate him that there were women all over the place. He had been in the crowd a long time before he became aware, not just of them, but of the fact that he did not react to them in any way. Only 3 days before, this would not have been possible. He would have preferred to trek 1,000 miles on foot rather than sit in the same vehicle as a woman. In his part of Kampi it was not even permissible for a man to give his wife, daughter, or sister a ride in his Okada or bicycle. Now it felt as if he was experiencing the immediacy of these women in a dream, one in which he could commit any sin and not be held accountable by his conscience, or the Hisbah, the Shahira police. Suddenly it seemed the women were everywhere. Because of the crowd some were pressing in on him. Many of them wore trousers and shorts, and some did not cover their heads. The voices of the younger girls floated in the Harmattan wind like a strange, sweet melody.